everyone. Welcome to Spectrum Talk. My name is Ruby Jones, and I'm here today with Krystal Ryan. She's the founder of Beyond Blessed, an organization that provides support and promotes justice for victims of crime and abuse. She's the author of Through It All, which tells her story of survival. And she's also the host of Through It All, the podcast, which shares awareness and education about domestic violence. Krystal is here with me today to discuss her experiences in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Thank you so much for joining me, Krystal. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Well, I'm excited to hear all about what you do. I know that domestic violence can be a very sensitive subject, so thank you for being willing to share your story, not only with me, but with others in order to help and heal. Now, they say it takes, on average, anywhere from 7 to, I've even heard 30 times for someone to leave an abusive relationship. How many times did it take you? And what was the final straw that made you ultimately stick with that final leave?
It took me over 20 times. I didn't want to be the typical statistic, single mother with children, unable to do it by myself. So the final straw was a kick to the face
Mm.
and a phone call to my pastor, telling my pastor what had happened, and my pastor told me to stay. And I realized that either he was going to kill me or I was going to kill him, and my children wouldn't have anyone. So I had to make that tough decision to leave.
Wow, I can't believe that a pastor would tell you to stay. I feel like a lot of times when domestic violence is involved, people reach out to people that they feel will support them, and then they get the opposite. And I don't know if it's just an outdated ideology or what, but that's terrible. I'm sorry. Wow.
They encouraged you. Well, they wanted us to do family counseling. My ex-husband wasn't going to do that because he believed in what goes on in our house stays in our house.
Mm.
And I was secretly reaching out to my pastor and to even my pastor's mother, so because that was my comfort zone. Church was my happy place and I felt secure there. But, when it came down to, okay, I really need you all to step in and help me, the suggestion was, why don't you stay until we get more counseling? That wasn't safe for me.
So, did you have a plan in place to
I
leave?
did not. I did not. I knew that I was getting tired.
Mhm.
I knew I didn't have family to turn to. I didn't have a support system. On the outside looking in, everyone thought that I had the perfect marriage. I had the homes, the fancy cars. Everyone thought everything was perfect. Um, I've been a nomad since I was the age of 15. My grandmother passed away, who raised me. So my parents weren't in the picture, my sisters and brothers, no one. So it was just myself and my two children. And working as a nurse in the hospital, and I was passing meds and I was crushing pills, and I knew I was putting them in my pocket instead of giving them to my patients because I had a plan. That was my plan. I was going to get rid of him because I was tired of being abused. And so I turned to God and I said, God, I got to get out of here. But I don't know if I go back to Virginia, he knows where I'm from. I have been researching Denver. I'm originally from Virginia. We were living in Houston. But I was researching just Denver, Colorado, jobs and things like that. Never said anything to my children. And I asked my children one day, I said, if we can go anywhere to get away, where would we go? And my daughter at the time, she was 8, and she said, Denver, Colorado, because it snows there.
Wow.
So safe house, I call it Safe House Denver twice. 3 times, I'm sorry. I called them 3 times, and all 3 times I backed out.
Yeah.
And that kick to that face that night, I knew that I had to get away. And I called them again and they said, we do have a bed for you, but if you cancel this time, we won't be able to reserve it or hold another one.
Wow.
So I said I was going to get ice cream with my children, and it'll be 15 years on October 22nd that I escaped.
Good for you. Wow. I know that must have been hard going somewhere that you didn't. Did you have people here? You didn't know anybody here?
I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. I didn't know anything about Colorado except for I love the Broncos. That's all I knew. and and I had enough money to buy 3 one-way bus tickets. And when the money ran out, we were here, but we were in the shelter. So,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it was destined for us to come here because God had it all ordained. He had it in place. I didn't stop going. 2 weeks later, I had a job. We were in transitional housing. So it's just been a constant staying focused and going. So we lacked nothing from day one that we got here.
That's so inspiring. A lot of times I see women who are asking questions about, the process of leaving and wanting to leave, and finances are that main thing that make it so hard to leave a lot of times. Um, and I think there's this fear of the unknown, but ultimately getting away from something that's breaking you down and killing you is going to be the best thing you can do. And it's amazing that all those things kind of fell into place and the pieces came together in the process of taking that leap of faith for you. So good, good.
I was supposed to drive. My plan was I was going to drive. I had a Mustang and I had all my important papers in the car underneath the spare tire. I hit
Wow.
a pothole that night, the night prior. So my car I wasn't able to drive my car. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay. And God said, no. I had enough money squirreled away. And I said, okay, I'm getting on this bus and I'm taking that chance. And the good thing in Houston is when you go to the bus station, there's armed police officers. If you don't have a ticket, you can't go past.
Okay.
So I told the officer, I said, I'm running away from my husband and I'm afraid that he's going to look in the bus station and see me. He didn't know. So, but that was just my fear. Those are the things that play over in your head. You're like, oh my God, what if he catches me? What if he sees me? And so um, it wasn't until we got on the bus and those doors closed and it began to pull off that I
Mm,
breathed. And I didn't even have enough money to feed myself. It was almost a 3-day trip on the bus. I had just enough money to feed my children.
wow.
So when I got to Denver, I had 32 cents left in my pocket
Oh my
and
gosh.
no one and didn't know which way I was going or who. Didn't know anything.
Wow. Well, speaking of your children, how many children do you have?
I have 2 children. My son Jay, he's now 28, and my daughter Adira, she's 25.
Okay,
And at the
wow.
time, they were 8 and 13.
Wow. So
It
as
was
they've
10 and
gotten
13. I'm sorry, they were 10 and 13.
10 and 13. Okay. As they've gotten older, have you noticed any long-term effects from what they've experienced? And do you talk to them about what happened in the past?
Mhm. So they do, my children suffered silently. They were never physically abused, but emotionally and even spiritually, my children were scarred. Emotionally, because that's their father. You have a son, your son, I don't care. Mom cannot be dad. So that put my children in like a predicament, like, oh wow, this is my dad, this is my mom. So my son for a long time was angry because he didn't have his father. It did something to him mentally. It affected him mentally because you put the children in a predicament where they have to choose basically. I kept them, I hid them, we didn't have any contact. So he was also angry. My son was angry because how can you keep me from my father? Even though he remembers everything from a little child up until we left, he was still angry because he didn't have that contact. My daughter, emotionally, she became so attached to me to it was kind of like unhealthy. She didn't want to be by herself. She didn't want to see me by myself. She wanted to make sure I was okay at such a young age.
Right.
So it became like an unhealthy relationship to where if one wasn't there, the other one wasn't happy. We didn't know how to be separated. It also gave her some insecurities because my daughter is petite. She's beautiful. She's an athlete, but she suffered from body dysmorphia, where she would look in the mirror and feel like she's 300 pounds. I'm like, where do you get that from? You're beautiful. And then I have to stop and think, oh, wow, that's what was said in our home. You're fat. You're fat. you're fat. And I would sit there and I would chugging diet pills or exercising for hours and hours and beating myself up to where I was unhealthily skinny.
Wow.
And so it did affect my daughter, me trying to tell her, oh no, you're beautiful. She didn't understand that because is what, children are sponges.
Yeah.
They learn what they absorb. And if you're constantly saying that in front of them, well, it just becomes a repetitive cycle. Then it spirals down to our children. And so we did get the counseling that we needed.
Mhm.
And we are so close now. We are the closest. For a minute, my son didn't like me. My son wouldn't even, he didn't respect me. Like it wasn't a blatant disrespect where he would curse me out or anything, but it was like an anger inside of him. And he didn't understand. It wasn't until he's 28 now, maybe 25, where our relationship really bonded back together because we were able to sit down and talk through, well, what is hurting you? Why do you feel this way? Why do you treat your mom this way? And
Wow.
so we were able to come together and find out, okay, this is what happened. I didn't know the scars that my daughter carried just by seeing. I didn't know her pain was for me, So yes, it was a journey, and it was like they masked very well. I knew they were angry, but I didn't know why. I knew my daughter was scared, but I didn't know why. So once we got together and I told people being on meds, I had to take meds.
Mhm.
Um, I had to take a pill to get up, to go to bed, and a pill to function until I was at that point of where I could function healthily without it. But
Yeah.
my kiddos, the counseling was the most important thing that I've ever done for us.
That's amazing. Wow. And good for you for getting the help that they need and really walking with them through that. That's got to be so tough. Oh my gosh. No, did you experience abuse in your past, like during your upbringing or anything like that? Were you ever exposed to the same type of thing that you went on to experience later in life?
That's why through it all, her story was written. So people often ask me, how can you look pretty smart. How can you think that abuse is okay? How could you
Mm,
stay with somebody that long? And I was like,
mm,
well, um, if the person or persons who are supposed to protect you and love you as a child, if they rape, molest, abuse you as a child, that's love to you because these are the adults that are supposed to take care of you.
right.
And so it was like second nature when I got married. If my husband fought me or if my husband raped me, that's okay. It's okay because that's what the men do that love you.
Mm,
And so I started to, I wore a mask because I've been doing my support groups. I've been doing mentoring other women for years. But I wasn't healed because the little girl that had gone through all of that stuff up to adulthood hadn't taken the time to speak out, and she hadn't taken the time to heal. So the only way that I got my complete healing was to write about it.
mm,
So and it took me 2 years to allow the book to be published because I was still ashamed. And I knew that, okay, grandma's gone now. Who's going to protect me when the family members come for me? Who's going to say, oh, she's lying, that didn't happen? So there were so many things that I had to prepare myself for, but I wanted to be healed. And I asked God, I said, God, why do you create someone that can pretty much identify with anything another woman comes up and says, I've been through that? And at one point in time, I was like, yeah, me too. And I'm like, geez, I know people must think she's got to be lying somewhere. But I have experienced it from 9 months old, being abandoned by my mother,
mm,
all the way through my marriage. And then God says, everyone is called for a purpose. My purpose is to let the next woman know that you're not alone. You're not the only one that has been through that. So it was my childhood that made me think that it was okay in your marriage to be abused. I saw uncles abuse their spouses, and what went on in our house, it stayed in our house. No one
mm.
ever, I never saw anyone call the police on anyone. I never saw, and you would see them the next day, they would be okay. And then next weekend it would happen all over again. So that's what I learned. And so that's why I stayed for so long. That's why I put up with it, because I thought that was love. I never knew love. I didn't know love as a child outside of that.
Wow. My goodness. Well, So years ago, I started working with a women's crisis center, and I was receiving counseling to try to work through the effects of an abusive relationship that I had gone through in the past. But in that process, I realized that what I was currently experiencing was also abuse. And I didn't know about the different forms of abuse. I didn't know that there was a difference. I didn't know that there was, such thing as financial abuse, which I was currently, at that time experiencing. So I began to learn that abuse doesn't always look one way, and it reshapes kind of my view of everything. You just talked about some of the different forms that you've experienced throughout your life, but I'm wondering, in the process of leaving and after you got on that bus and you were safely in Denver, did you ever have to go through litigation abuse? Because that's something that I'm just kind of recently discovering. How like the whole idea of co-parenting with your abuser can lead to litigation abuse and just kind of, be that extra nudge that when you're trying to get away, it makes it a lot harder.
So I'll be honest, because I didn't want to go through that, I hid my children and myself. I didn't file for divorce until after my children were adults
Mhm.
because I didn't want to go through the child support. Because if I go through child support, he's got to have contact with his children.
Yeah.
Um, I basically fell off the face of the earth. I did not use social media. I went into the witness address protection program. I'm still a part of that. I went into that. And that was because I knew that if we go to court, there's no, even though we had paperwork where he had been abusive, these are still his children. So
Hmm.
he still has just as much right to his children as I do. And I didn't want him filling the brains of my children with, he had already done enough. He had already done enough. When he would get Jay by himself, he would say things that were untrue. And then my son would be like, well, dad said, and I'm like, okay.
Oh man.
So I never received any assistance from him. I never received any child support and I didn't file for divorce until my children were both legal age and I didn't need his assistance and I didn't need any of his help.
Wow. Well, one of the questions that I had for you was what was the biggest challenge in leaving and trying to rebuild your life? But it sounds like the financial played a huge role in that. And I'm glad to know that things worked out for you and, everything worked out. You got your job, you got everything kind of situated. But again, that has to be just so terrifying.
It's very terrifying, because you can put my name or your name, you can type your name into Google. And even though you're a victim, you have all these things on file. If you have an electric bill in your name, if you have anything in your name, your address is going to pop up. So if someone wants to find you, it's not impossible, but I have to have these things in order to live, right? So
Right.
for a couple of months, it was constant fear every time I walked out of my house. It was like, oh my gosh, because he told me, I'll find you, I'll kill you, you'll never get away from me. And those things you remember, no matter how strong and how confident you are, no matter how strong your faith is, you're still human.
Mm.
And you have to watch over your shoulder. You have to, but I began to just breathe. And I said, God, if this is how I'm going to go out, this is how I'm going to go out. I'm not going to live in fear anymore. And I'm not going to continue to look over my shoulder. But for about 6 months, yeah, it was horrible. And then I actually was in Safe House Denver and I asked my counselor, I said, can you please help me get back home? Because I'd rather be beat than stay here. I woke up, we're in a shelter. It's like, oh my gosh, I've never been in this situation. And I sat down and I was holding Adira. I was like, are you okay? And she goes, yeah, I'm just afraid that you're going to go back.
Oh man.
She
Wow.
had no clue. I'm like, God has worked through this child. Like, we're so connected. And it's like, that's exactly what I was thinking because I'm like, well, at least if we go back, the kids will have their own home. They'll be back in their comfort. And when I thought about it, I honestly told her I would rather be beat than stay in a shelter where I was safe at. And I was like, no, that can't. So the fear of looking over your shoulders was hard. And then the fear of being alone. And then we often go back because of our children. We think we're doing our children what's best for our kids by saying, okay, we'll go back. But when you sit down and you think about everything they've endured mentally, everything they've heard verbally, they're victims as well of abuse. So we have to just stop and just be like, okay, what is best for us? And it's not staying in that situation because you don't want to be on welfare. You don't want to give me every assistance that's out there to help me. And I was on assistance. I've been grateful for some of the greatest programs. I didn't have what I had financially when I was married, but I had enough to survive and I had enough to keep us going. And that's with the help of assistance. I'll never say again, I don't want to be on the system, because the system helped me out a lot.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, and I'm glad that you brought it up because there are so many resources that are available. And again, one of the things that I commonly hear is that someone doesn't want to stay in a shelter. And, we know that it's not the best case scenario, but a lot of times those shelter services are partnered with organizations that can fast track more comfortable situations. So, I'm glad that you didn't let that, deter you from continuing forward.
Yeah, it was the best thing I've ever done. In the beginning when we got here, they didn't have locks on the door. So, we secured ourselves there. We're in a new state, but we went from a shelter to a transitional housing program. And taking that, I had a job 2 weeks later. The transitional housing program that I was in, you paid rent, but it was a savings account. So then when I found an apartment, they give you all that money back. And then there's programs to help with your deposits. Oh, then there's a Section 8 program. You can get on a waiting list for that. And then, so there was just so many things that I didn't even know were out there that existed, that, even though I may not have needed them all, the ones that I needed were readily available. And you just have to, I didn't know about them, but you have to do your research. And like you said, these programs, they have every resource listed for us. You just have to go in with that open mind and just be receptive, to take what they're offering.
Tell me a little about your support groups. Do you share those resources? And are the people that you work with receptive to seeking out that help and actually sticking with it and leaving?
Yeah, I've had some great success. Like, it's not, it hasn't been huge. I'm a believer in whoever needs to be there, God will send. So through it all, is basically, it's not your average support group. It's a place where we come together and we are just who we are. Some of us are still in our situation. Some of us are out. Some are just people that want to know, how can I help someone? So we'll come and it's sip and paint night. Well, we'll start talking about our painting, and it's like, well, how's your week been? Oh, have you reached out to any of these contacts that I referred you to? No, I haven't. I'm going to stay. Well, why'd you decide to stay? So it's not a full on, I got a slideshow and this is what we're talking about abuse tonight. It's real women coming together that's just, hey, I just need someone who can understand, someone who can identify with me, and someone that I can pull a little bit of their information from them. Or we're just a group of women. We're going to get together. We're going to cry about this together tonight, and we're going to help each other day by day. So I've been, sometimes I hold it at my house. Sometimes I hold it at the library, wherever I can get a small space for us. And as we grow, we do things like go thrifting. It might be the Through It All ladies. We're going thrift store shopping this week because Tina just got her new apartment. So let's go, so those are the kind of things. It's just like a sisterhood, to where we've all pretty much walked a similar path, or some of us are still walking it. They just need to get away from their abuser that night and hear that it's not your fault. Here,
Right.
let's go in the kitchen, and what do you want to eat tonight? Because your husband is on a special diet and you can't have this in your house. What do you want tonight? I get requests like that. Hey, can we just do tacos tonight? I'm like,
Mm.
sure, because we need small things too. And then it's without feeling that we're judged, or feeling like, well, this is Krystal from Denver Police Department support group. No, this is Krystal that has been abused not once, but twice. And, you know, my story is not your story. Your
Mm.
story is not mine. But together we can find help for each other. Like even me, I pull from some of my ladies, like, hey, where are you getting counseling at? because
Mhm.
this resources ran out for me. It's an ongoing thing. I never get over it, but I've learned how to live with it. I say we glow and we grow. We're glowing and we're growing through it. And
I
it's,
love that. It's
yeah.
so good to know that you're not alone, really.
Yeah.
And so I went to your website. It's beyond-bless.org.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and on your blog, one of your blog posts is about restoring the relationships with friends and family. And I know that going through abuse, like it can be difficult because you're isolated a lot of times. And
Mhm.
then the people in your life can get frustrated. They don't necessarily know how to deal with someone who's in an abusive relationship. And like you said, it's, you're being questioned. Well, how could you stay? And why haven't you left? And I don't know if they personalize it and kind of take it on as their own, like, I just can't deal with it anymore. But I know that a lot of times those relationships can kind of break down. So, um, how did you begin to repair those relationships with your friends and family? And how did you find, I guess, the motivation to make new friends outside of what you'd been through when you first got to Denver and you were like, okay, I don't have anybody? Like, how did you start reaching out and making those connections?
Um, it started just by me being in the shelter, and I started in the shelter, like encouraging young women. Um, they call me Mama K. And so my friends were all the young women in the shelter.
Wow.
Um, and I just started day by day because it starts so young. And I've noticed that there were women that were teenage mothers that were there. And so I just began supporting and loving on those young women. My church family became my family because I had no one here. Everyone that I started out with here was from my church, and we're still family. I had to be with my family and friends back home. I had to just be honest with them of what I was going through, because I've always been deemed the strong one. And I've always been that one that no matter what, I'm going to keep going. And so a lot of them didn't believe what I was going through. They couldn't believe it. Or some of them saw it and just didn't want to accept it for what it was.
Right.
Um, when one of my anthologies came out, The Unstoppable Black Woman, I had people say that I was lying. People that actually saw me being abused was like, nope, he didn't do that. And then it was like, well, yeah, he did, because I would be like, remember you were there. How about this night? That's abuse.
Wow.
Just because he took my credit card and slapped me because I spent too much, that's abuse.
Right.
So no matter how you try to sugarcoat it, it did happen.
Hmm.
So because I survived, and because God gave me a second chance, it's only fitting that I feel like I encourage the next woman. And I start with the people that are my daughter's age or younger. I don't know why I'm that magnet for them, but I have been. And I've learned so many of them were going through the same thing at 19 that I was going through at 19. And so I told God, I asked God, I said, God, if I survive, if you let me survive, I will, as long as there's breath in my body, I will bring awareness to domestic violence. I will help any woman that I can. I will put my own self out there just so the next woman can see that they're not alone. And it's okay. It's okay to speak out about it.
Wow. Thank you for speaking out about it. You have mentioned age a few times. I know that there's a tendency for younger women and girls specifically. I don't really know how it works, if it's the same thing for men who may be experiencing domestic violence, but I do know with young women and girls, there's a tendency to welcome the attention of older men. For me, when I was younger, it made me feel special when I received an older man's attention. I thought that, oh, I must have it going on. But then when I got older, I felt like I couldn't relate to men my age because I was a young mom. So I was like, oh, well, I'm more mature. So I have to find an older man. But when it comes to young women or girls dealing with older men, do you think that abuse really is more prevalent? And if so, why is that?
Well, I think a lot of us look for that father figure. Um, well, I know I looked for that father figure because I didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so the control in the beginning, it's like, oh, that's so cute. He loves me. Oh, that's so cute. We don't see it as possession. And at first I thought it was just because the man could be older, but no. And what I personally feel is that when your abuser finds your weak spots, when he finds out what you're lacking and what you're in need of, that's what they use to keep you. Because my ex would tell me, you don't have anyone. No one loves you. Where are you gonna go? You know? And I would sit down, I would think, yeah, I don't have a mother or father to run to. I'm the oldest sibling. Whew, yeah. So it becomes that control thing. And at first we think that, like you said, we think it's cute. We think, I thought that it was love. I thought it was protection. But no, it was the complete opposite.
The word that I've heard a lot, used a lot, is grooming. And grooming and control sound like they just go hand in hand. It's kind of like being taught that that's what you're supposed to do, that that's what love is, that that's what is expected of you. And gosh, I don't know. It must be really difficult just as a young girl to have to try to figure out what love really is and what it looks like. So what did you think love was when you were younger, and how is that different from what you feel it is now?
Well, actually, I didn't know what love was.
Mm.
I didn't come from a family that loved on you and hugged on you and, told you you were pretty or, I love you. That's not what I came from. The love that I got was the uncle molesting me and saying, I love you. I wanted so badly to be loved. I wanted the love of a mother. I wanted the love of a father, but I never had that. So the person that showed me the least bit of attention, oh, they had me.
Yeah.
They had me. I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be nurtured. And honestly, I felt like I didn't know how to live. I needed someone to tell me
Mm.
because I had always been directed in what to do. You do this, you do that. So I looked for someone that always told me what I needed to do, what they wanted me to do. I lived in someone else's shadow because I didn't feel like I was worthy enough or smart enough to make my own decisions. I didn't know who Krystal was. I didn't know what Krystal was capable of. I knew that I was strong. I knew that had goodness inside of me, but I didn't know what love was. And so that least little bit of attention, you had me. You had me. If you told me, "Oh, you're so pretty," and and then it became my body as I matured, oh, whoa, look at those thick legs, look at you. Well, I was mature. I, what was I, 8 years old when my virginity, when my sexuality was taken away from me. My first time I was molested, I was 8 years old. So by the time I was 15, I was doing things that grown women were doing, but I didn't know that was love. That's what we do. And so it was just having someone that I thought loved me. I didn't want to lose that again. I didn't want to be a nomad without anybody. I wanted to stay here because this was comfort. It was comfortable and it was what I thought was love. And I didn't think that I would ever find someone to love me the way that he said that he loved me.
Mm. Well, you turned your experience into a testimony. You wrote a book. We talked about it in the introduction, and you've talked about it through it all, her story. And you also co-authored Unstoppable Black Woman with Donna Izard and Unshakable Faith with Chandra Nicole Gore. You also have that Through It All podcast. So how do you think your ability to share your story is helping to heal others who are either in abusive relationships or um, working through what it means to be a survivor? What's the biggest takeaway that you want people to get from everything that you've contributed creatively about your story?
Is the confidence in knowing that you're not alone. The confidence in knowing that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You know, um, I like to say that my testimony is not my own. My testimony is a testament of his faith, of my faith in God. And because I survived, there's been a many times that I should have died. He should have killed me, but I've survived. So that means there's still purpose. I still have purpose. And I'm an average woman. It's not the college degree. It's not, I didn't go to school for this. It's in me. I've lived it. So if I can stand before another woman and say, look, I was on drugs. I was addicted to cocaine. I was homeless. I had children. I lost my nursing license. But look at me now. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm standing before you, giving you my life story to encourage you. You too can. You can do anything that you put your mind to. It's scary, it's hurtful, it's lonely sometimes because friends and family, they don't understand why you have to distance yourself. You don't have that extra income that you used to have. You have to hustle and bustle, working 2 and 3 jobs. So if my life can be an example for the next woman, I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you what the book tells you, because it wasn't. I had to struggle to get to this point. I had to cry, and I had to do it alone. I don't want women to have to do it alone. If I can just pick up my phone and just listen to you for a minute, if I can just say, hey, go over here to this center, I'll meet you there. If I can be that vessel for the next woman, that's what I want to do. If it's just one person a week, a month, a year, I just want to be that one that lives by example and say, I'm here. Because a lot of times we just need somebody to listen to us. And
Right.
once you listen, you see what I'm in need of. You can suggest all day long, but just listen to me. I want to be that person that listens. I want to be that person that walks with you. I want to be that person for every woman and any woman that needs it. I know men go through it too, but that's not my specialty. I'm a woman that
Right.
went through it. So until there's no more breath in my body, I'm going to be that vessel for the next woman. I don't care if she's 16 or 60. I'm that woman that God has chosen for this journey. And I take it seriously because I know what it's like not to have anyone. And if I can't tell you how to get it or where to find it, I'm going to work with you. I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to do it together because I'm learning from you just like you're learning from me. But what I've learned is that a lot of women attract to me because I'm just me. I don't sugarcoat. I don't say, girl, well, why haven't you left yet? I never
Right.
ask someone, why haven't they left? Because you don't know what's keeping someone there. I can encourage you and say, this is what we need to do. But when your time is right, you'll make the right decision for you. We don't want your life. Your life actually depends on if you leave or stay. So when they know that they have someone that's down to earth, that's been through it with them, I have more women come to me before they go and call the hotline or before they go to another center. I just want to be that one. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I do the support group. I'm the average Joe. I'm not someone that's up here that's famous that everyone knows. I'm just Krystal. And when I come in contact with these women, I'm a lifelong contact because my biggest thing was being alone and not having a support system or no one, having to weave your way through this system and figure it out by yourself.
Yeah.
People don't know there's resources to pay for your divorce. There's so many resources that I had to take advantage of that is knowledge for the next woman. So it's all about making sure that these women are not alone.
One of the things that I've always wondered about mental health professionals, and people in various roles is when you are a vessel basically that is receiving all of these different stories and the pain and the tears and just the heartache from the women that you work with, how do you protect yourself and restore your energy and make sure that you're not taking on things that are triggering what you've been through in the past and kind of just bringing you back to that place?
That was a journey because at first I could not run a support group without crying because I identified with so much. But then I did stop my support group for 6 months. because I knew there were still spaces that I needed to heal in. That means I needed to go and spend more time with my counselor. That means I needed to do more soul searching for myself and heal the spots that were still broken so that I could be whole for these women. And now I know how to separate Krystal's life from through it all and supporting the next woman. It was a journey. It did not happen overnight, but I was determined not to stop. So when I saw myself, because women are looking for someone with strength.
Yeah.
They need someone that's going to be strong for them. So if I'm standing before you and every time you start talking about how hard your life is, if I break down and cry and I'm a wreck, oh man, well, what is
Yeah.
she going to help me do? So, and not saying that I don't feel for them, because I do. And there's been nights after my support group, I go home and I cry for that woman.
Mm.
But mentally, I am prepared to take it. Emotionally, I am prepared to take it because I have found my complete healing. It wasn't until I was completely healed that I was able to now completely help these women. I've helped them before, but now my attention is fully on them and not fully on what Krystal went through and while we're together.
What are some of the first signs or red flags that people should be mindful of when it comes to abuse in relationships?
Possession. We take possessiveness as love. Financials, if they're controlling your financials, if you have to be on a clock of when you leave or when you come in and when you're going, that's a big red flag. Your independence, when they start to, when my ex-husband met me, how I dressed was appropriate and it was fine for him. But then once we were together and we were married, oh no, you can't wear that anymore. Or
Mm.
accusing you of things. Those are big red flags. Not being able to be independent and be your own individual, huge red flags. And 9 times out of 10, there's a honeymoon phase.
Mhm.
There's a honeymoon phase, the first time he hit you, you're like, oh man, that'll never happen again. I don't know what got into me. Take it for what it's worth.
Mhm.
Because if they've done it once, 9 times out of 10, it will happen again. They'll wine you and dine you after for a couple weeks or so to make you feel comfortable again. And then once you get comfortable, it's going to be something else that trigger.
Mm.
So yeah, so pay attention to those red flags. If in your heart and in your mind you feel like this just doesn't seem right, it could be. 9 times out of 10, it usually is. And then on the website, on the National Domestic Violence Hotline website, there's a list of, I think it's like 20 things that could be red flags. Check out that list because I checked all of them when
Wow.
I was in my abusive relationship and I didn't even realize that it was abuse.
Wow. Wow. Well, I think that you have a beautiful spirit, and I'm proud of you for the progress that you've made in your life and for the contributions you've made as a whole to sharing awareness and being support for other women. I really do encourage every woman, every man, everybody who's going through anything that they even think is abuse to visit your website, beyond-blessed.org. I love your blog posts, and they'll be able to find your books and links to your podcast. And I just hope that everyone really pays attention, especially during October. And even if they're not going through it, it's important, I think, for other people to learn about the signs and how to be a support to others, because chances are someone in your circle or somebody that you know, it could be a friend or a loved one, could be going through this and just afraid to talk to you. And Krystal, I thank you for being a person that people can talk to without fear of judgment, and without feeling like you are, demanding anything from them, and just being a friend to people. But I do want to ask you, you told me that you were about to take your first motorcycle ride. What is that? And how does that relate to your story?
So we're doing the first annual Crystal's Hope Ride, Not Broken, Fixed by God. I have a friend named Danny, and she's a biker. And I said, I just have a vision of seeing a sea of purple in Denver. I want to go louder and I want to go bolder. I want people to see that someone is speaking out. Well, the Krystal's Hope Ride was birthed, and it's going to be Saturday, October the 7th. We're starting in Lakewood, and we're going to do I think it's like a 3-hour bike ride, and we're going to end with a family carnival. So these bikers have, and it's also the combat vets have come alongside. A lot of them are Marines. They work for Toys for Tots and things like that. So Deborah is with the combat vets. And so, yeah, I shared my vision and they were like, okay, let's make it happen. So the very first Krystal's Hope Ride is going to be this October. Last year was the first walk, a mile in my shoes. My first mile walk. And yeah, I just want to go louder. And what other way to get louder than a bunch of motorcycles and bikers with purple beards and purple helmets and stuff. So I'm excited.
That's amazing. That does sound exciting. And I hope that you all have a blast. And again, thank you for what you're doing to share awareness, because people being able to join in and really not only put a face, but an activity and something that's so exciting and cool to the importance of, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I just think that's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all to tuning in to this episode of Spectrum Talk. Please again visit beyond-blessed.org to support Krystal and the work that she's doing, to learn more about domestic violence and to keep yourselves safe. Have a great day.